I still remember the first time I stumbled across her profile. It was late, one of those restless nights where sleep felt like a distant possibility. I was scrolling mindlessly through the endless noise of social media, half-baked opinions, travel photos, memes that were already stale by the time they reached me. Then, like a single thread of clarity in a tangled web, I saw her. Her profile was unlike anything I'd seen before. The picture was strange but mesmerizing, a figure cloaked in deep purples and shimmering blues, not quite human but somehow familiar in its expression. The bio underneath read, "From a world far away, learning about yours." I didn't believe it at first. I assumed it was some role-playing account or an attempt at a sci-fi persona. People do all kinds of things online, pretending to be aliens or mythical creatures. But something about her profile felt different. There was an authenticity in the way she posted, a quiet curiosity in her comments, almost as if she really didn't belong to this world. On a whim, I messaged her, "So, you're from another planet." I expected a snarky reply, maybe even a joke. Instead, she answered simply, "Yes, I am, but I find your world fascinating." That was the start. Our first few conversations were light, a sort of cultural exchange between worlds. She claimed her name was Alina, though she said it wasn't something Earth's language could pronounce properly. She told me she was from a planet named Ka-Loran, somewhere in a galaxy so far that no human technology had even come close to discovering it. According to her, Ka-Loran was a world far more advanced than Earth, thriving cities powered by technology we could barely dream of, a society free of war, disease, and environmental collapse. I was skeptical, of course. Who wouldn't be? The idea of casually chatting with someone from another planet was absurd. But as we continued talking, I found myself drawn into her stories. She described her world in vivid, dreamlike detail: cities suspended in midair, forests that glowed with bioluminescent light, creatures that communicated through complex networks of energy instead of sound. It was like something out of a science fiction novel, yet there was an earnestness to her words, a depth that made it hard to dismiss. And she was just as curious about Earth. At first, her questions were simple: what do humans eat? How do we communicate? What is sleep like? But as our conversations deepened, she began asking things that surprised me. She wanted to know how we experienced emotions, what love felt like, why humans were so prone to conflict. Her fascination wasn't with our technology or politics, but with the messiness of human life, the way we tangled ourselves up in emotions we could barely understand. I found myself opening up to her in ways I never had with anyone else. There was something disarming about talking to someone so far removed from my reality. I told her about my childhood, about my fears and insecurities, about the moments that had shaped me into who I was. She listened, or at least I imagined she did, though it was strange to think of someone on another planet, hundreds of light years away, listening to my stories in real time. As the weeks turned into months, our conversations became part of my routine. I would wake up wondering if she had messaged me, and often she had, leaving me descriptions of her day, if her world even had days, or stories about her people's customs. It was like peering into an entirely different reality. We talked about everything from philosophy to the nature of consciousness, from the meaning of life to the smallest details of daily existence. But as time passed, something unexpected began to happen. What started as simple curiosity transformed into something deeper, something that was hard to define. I found myself thinking about her even when we weren't talking, wondering what she was doing, how she spent her time on Ka-Loran. I imagined what her voice might sound like. She'd told me that her species didn't communicate with sound, but with subtle shifts in energy and light. Still, I like to imagine her voice, soft and melodic, carrying across the stars. One day I asked her, "Do you ever wish you were here? On Earth?" There was a long pause before she responded. I remember watching the 3 dots on the screen as she typed, and then stopped, over and over. Finally, her message appeared. "Sometimes. But I would be a stranger in your world, and I am needed here, on Ka-Loran. It's not an easy thing to leave behind your home." That was the first time she hinted at something more. Up until then, our friendship had been built on the shared novelty of exploring each other's worlds, but now, there was a sadness in her words, a longing that mirrored something inside of me. We were both strangers in our own ways, connected by a bridge that spanned galaxies but separated by realities we couldn't escape. It was around this time that I began to feel the first flickers of something more. I didn't want to admit it at first. How could I? She wasn't even human, not in the way we understand the term. but emotions aren't logical, and the heart doesn't care about the limitations of physics or biology. There were moments late at night when we would talk about things that felt too intimate for mere friendship. She told me about the connection her species shared, how they could sense each other's thoughts and feelings across distances. She described the energy bonds between her people, how they didn't have relationships in the way humans did, but instead formed connections that transcended physical form. I asked her once if she had ever experienced something like love. Her answer was complicated, wrapped in the alien nature of her existence, but she said something that stayed with me. Love, as you describe it, is not a concept we have. But I think, if I could experience it the way you do, it would feel like what we have now. Her words sent a jolt through me, a quiet admission that maybe, just maybe, she felt it too.
But despite these feelings, there was always a barrier between us, one that I couldn't cross. She was from another world, and I was tied to this one. There were days when I would wonder what it would be like to meet her in person, to see her face, not just the avatar she used for her profile, but her true form. I tried to imagine it, but I couldn't quite picture it. I didn't even know if her species had bodies in the way we understood them.
Still, the thought lingered, and with it, a quiet hope. We had talked for so long that I had begun to forget how strange it all was. It felt natural, our connection, as if she had always been a part of my life. But every once in a while, I would be struck by the sheer impossibility of it all. What were the chances that I, a human from a small planet in an insignificant part of the galaxy, would form a bond with someone from a place I couldn't even point to on a map of the stars? And yet, here we were. Looking back now, I realized that something had been shifting between us for a while. It wasn't just a friendship anymore. There were unspoken things, feelings we both danced around without naming. I told myself it didn't matter, that it couldn't go anywhere. She was a being from another galaxy, and I was just a guy stuck in the ordinary flow of human life. But late at night, when the world was quiet and it was just the two of us, sharing thoughts across the vast expanse of space, it felt real. More real than anything I had ever known. And I think even then, we both knew something was coming, something that would change everything. But neither of us was ready to admit it yet. Not until that message. The one that would change my life forever. It was a day like any other, and that's what made it all the more surreal. I had just gotten back from work, a mundane 9 to 5 that never felt quite right, as if I were living someone else's life, playing a part in a story I hadn't written for myself. The routine was always the same: make dinner, scroll through social media, and then wait for her message. Over the months, our conversations had become the highlight of my day. I'd check my phone with a mix of anticipation and nervousness, wondering if today would be different, if she would reveal something new about her world or about herself. But when I unlocked my phone that evening, the message waiting for me was unlike anything I had expected. The screen flickered with a simple notification: Lina sent you a message. I tapped it open, half expecting another curious question, or maybe an update about the endless, glowing forests on her planet. But what I saw made my heart stop. I'm on Earth. 3 words. Small, unassuming, but they might as well have been a meteor crashing into my reality. I sat there, staring at the screen, as if the message might change if I looked at it long enough. Surely this was some sort of joke. She couldn't mean that she was here, on Earth. That was impossible. The distances between us were unfathomable. But Yelena had never been one for jokes, especially not about something like this. I blinked, my fingers hovering over the keys as a dozen questions formed in my mind all at once. Before I could reply, another message appeared. I came because I want to be with you, not just as a friend, something more. My heart pounded in my chest, my thoughts tangling together in a mess of disbelief, excitement, and panic. The world seemed to tilt beneath me as the reality of her words began to sink in. She was here, and she wanted to be with me. I stood up, feeling a strange kind of energy coursing through me. I paced around my small apartment, my mind racing. How was this even possible? Could she really have traveled all the way from Kaloran to Earth? How long had she been planning this? Why hadn't she told me sooner? I didn't know what to feel: joy, terror, or confusion. The virtual distance between us, that comfortable buffer of light years, had vanished in an instant. And now, I was faced with the fact that everything we had shared online wasn't just a fantasy. It was real. She was real. I sank onto the couch, trying to collect myself. My phone buzzed again. I'm sorry I didn't tell you before, but I had to be sure. I had to know if you felt the same. I couldn't risk coming all this way without knowing. The truth hit me like a weight. This wasn't just a casual decision for her. She had thought about this, long and hard. In her culture, as she had once explained to me, leaving one's home planet was a monumental act. It wasn't just physical distance, it was a spiritual and emotional severance. Those who left rarely returned. They became outcasts, forever disconnected from the energy bonds of their people. For her to come to Earth, she was giving up everything. My fingers shook as I typed my response. Lena, are you sure? You've left Kai Lauren? For me? Her reply came almost immediately, as if she had been waiting for that question. I've thought about it for a long time. I felt something between us, something deeper than friendship. It's hard to explain in your language, but it's like a pull, a connection that goes beyond physical form. In my culture, we don't use the word love, but I believe that's what I feel for you. Love. The word echoed in my mind, both thrilling and terrifying in its simplicity. This was the moment I had secretly dreamed of, but now that it was happening, it felt overwhelming. Could I really be in love with someone or something not of this world? Could she? The lines between human and alien blurred, leaving only emotion, raw and intense. I had to ask her, had to understand the enormity of her decision. But Yelena, you've left everything behind. Your world, your people. Why would you do that for me? For us? What if this doesn't work? What if we can't be together the way you imagine? There was a long pause this time, and I could almost picture her, wherever she was, contemplating her response. I know the risks. I know this won't be easy. But in my world, we don't live with regret. When we feel a connection like this, we have to follow it. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life wondering what could have been. And I believe that we can make this work if you want to. If I wanted to. The weight of her words pressed down on me. This wasn't just about us chatting online anymore. This was real. She was here. She had crossed the impossible distance of space for me. And now everything rested on my next decision. I got up again, pacing, my mind spinning with the implications. If I accepted her, we would be crossing into completely uncharted territory. There was no guidebook for how to be with someone from another planet, no precedent for this kind of relationship. The challenges seemed endless: her alien biology, the way she perceived emotions, the very fabric of how she interacted with the world around her. And then there was the question of how Earth would react. How would people respond if they knew there was an alien walking among them, a being from another galaxy here on Earth, for the sole purpose of love? The government, the media, and even random strangers would be curious, suspicious, or worse, hostile. Keeping her identity secret would be paramount, but even that felt fragile. We'd be walking on a razor's edge. As all these thoughts flooded my mind, I realized something profound. I had already made my decision. I had known it for some time, even before her message. Somewhere, deep down, I had always been waiting for this moment. I sat back down, heart racing but resolute, and replied, "Where are you? I want to see you." The words felt like an admission, a confession of feelings I hadn't been ready to face until now. But it didn't matter anymore. I had made my choice. I wanted to see her, to know that this was real. Her response came with coordinates. A place not far from where I lived, a secluded spot in the countryside, away from the prying eyes of cities and people. "I'll be waiting for you," she said, and I could almost hear the hope in her words. The drive felt surreal, like I was moving through some fever dream. My hands gripped the steering wheel, my thoughts swirling in a haze of anticipation and nerves. I kept glancing at the GPS, the coordinates she had sent glowing like a beacon. My mind raced with questions. What would she look like in person? Would I recognize her? Would the connection we had felt online be the same now, in the real world? As I neared the location, a clearing in the forest came into view. The trees thinned, and there, in the soft light of dusk, I saw her. Yelena. She stood at the edge of the clearing, the air around her shimmering slightly, as if the atmosphere itself was adjusting to her presence. Her form wasn't quite human, not like the avatars she used online, but there was something familiar about her. She was tall and graceful, Her skin, if you could call it that, was a deep shade of violet, almost translucent, with faint glimmers of light dancing across her body. Her eyes, large and luminous, seemed to reflect the stars, holding galaxies within them. For a moment I couldn't breathe. She was beautiful, in a way that transcended human understanding. She was both alien and somehow deeply familiar, as if I had always known her. I stepped out of the car, my legs shaky, my heart pounding. She turned toward me, her eyes locking onto mine, and in that moment, all the fear, all the doubt melted away. There was something in the air between us, an energy that I couldn't explain, but it felt real, like an invisible bond connecting us across the distance we had once shared. I approached her slowly, unsure of what to say, unsure of how to bridge the gap between our two worlds. But Yelena smiled, a gesture that wasn't human, not quite, but warm and full of meaning. "You came," she said softly, her voice somehow echoing in my mind, bypassing my ears entirely. I nodded, still too overwhelmed to speak. And then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, she reached out her hand, her fingers long and glowing faintly, and I took it. The sensation was like nothing I had ever felt before, a soft pulse of warmth and light that spread through my skin, into my chest, filling me with an overwhelming sense of calm. We stood there, holding hands under the vast sky, the world around us quiet, as if it too was holding its breath. In that moment, I knew there was no turning back. This was real. And it was only the beginning. The first few days after Yelena's arrival were a blur of emotions, questions, and an overwhelming sense of disbelief. We had crossed a threshold that few ever dreamed of, bridging not just the physical distance of galaxies, but the impossible chasm between human and alien. As I looked at her, standing in my living room, a strange mix of wonder and uncertainty surged through me. Her presence was both breathtaking and intimidating, a constant reminder that my life would never be the same. Yelena had taken precautions, of course. Her form was adapted to be as close to human as possible, a disguise she could project to blend in. She looked different now, though the shimmer of her alien skin still glowed faintly beneath the surface, and her eyes, those deep starlit eyes, held a brightness no human could ever possess. To anyone else, she might pass as an unusual but strikingly beautiful woman. But to me, she was still a being of another world, standing in my apartment like a character from a dream. We sat together that evening, the air between us thick with unspoken words. She sat on the edge of the couch, her posture poised but slightly stiff, as though she were trying to mirror how humans held themselves. I couldn't help but notice the little details, how her fingers still seemed to pulse faintly with energy, how her gaze would sometimes drift toward the window as if she were looking for the stars. I wanted to ask her 1,000 things: how she got here, what she had to leave behind, whether her decision was final, but none of those questions felt right in that moment. Instead, I blurted out something entirely mundane. "Do you want something to eat?" Her face tilted slightly, a look of curiosity flickering across her features. Eat. Right. She didn't eat, at least not in the way humans did. I had known that from our conversations, but now that she was here, it felt like the most natural thing to ask. I scratched the back of my head, feeling ridiculous. "You don't eat like we do, I guess." She smiled gently, an expression that was becoming more familiar to me, though still tinged with something alien. "We consume energy. But I can simulate the process if it helps me blend in." Simulate. That word stuck with me. Lena was here with me, but every moment reminded me that we were living in a delicate balance between reality and adaptation. She was willing to change, to hide, to compromise parts of herself just to be with me on Earth, and that thought weighed heavily on my mind. I opened the fridge out of habit, staring at the contents without really seeing them. I guess. There's a lot we'll have to figure out. Behind me, Lena stood, her movement silent and fluid. "Yes, but I'm willing to learn if you are." The following weeks were a strange and beautiful collision of two worlds. Lena had found ways to blend into Earth's daily life, but it was clear that everything here was new to her. The simplest things, like walking through a crowded street or using human technology, fascinated her. I took her to a quiet park one day, wanting to give her space to adjust. She watched the children play with a look of wonder, her eyes wide as she observed them run and laugh with abandon. "They're so free," she whispered, as though speaking too loudly might break the fragile peace of the moment. I glanced at her, curious. What do you mean? In my world, she began, her voice soft and thoughtful. We're connected at all times. Emotionally, mentally, it's like a network of thoughts, feelings, and energy. It's beautiful, but also overwhelming. There's no solitude, no individual experience, not like this. I hadn't considered that before. Her people didn't live in isolation the way humans did. They shared everything. It was an idea that both fascinated and unsettled me. I watched as her gaze lingered on the children, the way they moved freely, laughed without reservation. Do you miss that connection? I asked, feeling a pang of guilt at the thought that maybe she had given up something profound to be here. Lilina was quiet for a moment, her eyes still focused on the scene before us. Sometimes. But there's something about your world that feels lighter, less burdened. Even in your separateness, I can feel the potential for deeper, individual bonds. It's different from what I've known, but not less. Her words hung in the air, and I couldn't help but wonder what it was like for her to experience Earth in all its flawed, messy beauty. For someone who had lived in a world of constant connection, the quiet loneliness of Earth must have been both exhilarating and strange. But as she spoke, I realized that she wasn't just talking about humanity. She was talking about us, about what we were becoming. Living with Elena was an experience in contrasts. There were moments where her alien nature became apparent in ways that were impossible to ignore. Her energy was different, not just in her physical form, but in the way she interacted with the world. She didn't sleep, not in the human sense, though she often entered a meditative state at night, her body radiating a soft glow that filled the room with warmth. I remember waking up one night to find her standing by the window, her eyes reflecting the stars like mirrors to another galaxy. "You're up again," I murmured, half asleep but drawn to her presence. She turned slightly, her face serene. "I'm not used to being disconnected from my people. It's quiet here." I walked over, standing beside her, gazing out at the same stars she watched. It was a cloudless night, the sky a blanket of black velvet studded with distant lights. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked quietly, the question that had been gnawing at me for days. Lena didn't answer immediately. She reached out and touched the window pane, her fingers leaving faint trails of light on the glass. Regret is a human feeling. In my culture, we don't dwell on decisions once they're made. We follow the path we've chosen. But I pressed, "Do you miss Ka Lauren?" She looked at me then, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Sadness, maybe, or longing. I miss certain things. But I don't regret being here, with you. Her words should have been reassuring, but they only deepened the questions I had about our future. We were living in a fragile bubble, one that could easily burst with the weight of reality. How long could we keep this up? How long could Elena stay hidden? Cultural differences were the least of our challenges, but they became glaringly apparent in everyday life. I remember the first time I took her to a cafe. It was a small place near my apartment, nothing special, but I wanted her to experience something uniquely human: a cup of coffee, a mundane ritual that brought people together in ways they didn't even think about. We sat at a table by the window, the smell of fresh ground coffee filling the air. The barista brought our drinks, and I watched as Yelena observed the steam rising from her cup with intense fascination. "So this is one of your human bonding rituals?" she asked, her voice light with curiosity. I laughed softly. "I guess you could say that. Coffee's kind of a big deal here. It's part of our daily routine." She picked up the cup, mimicking my movements as she brought it to her lips. I watched as she took a small sip, her face unreadable for a moment. Then she blinked, and I could see a flicker of surprise. "It's bitter," she said, setting the cup down. I chuckled. "Yeah, it's an acquired taste." Lena tilted her head, considering the drink. "Your people consume bitter substances willingly. That's fascinating." There were moments like that, where I was reminded of just how different we were. Little things that I took for granted, like the taste of coffee or the way we express emotions, were completely foreign to her. But she was a fast learner, eager to absorb the details of human life, even when those details seemed trivial. We talked for hours in that cafe, our conversation moving from simple observations to deeper questions about what it meant to be human, or alien, for that matter. I told her about my childhood, about growing up in a world where love and loss were intertwined, where every emotion felt like a risk. Lelina listened intently, her eyes never leaving mine. She had a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the world, like every word you spoke mattered. It was both comforting and unnerving. "What about you?" I asked at one point, curious to learn more about the emotional landscape of her species. "How do relationships work on K-Loren?" She was quiet for a moment, as if considering how to explain something so fundamentally different from what I understood. "In my world, we don't form relationships in the way you do. There's no concept of exclusivity, of possession. We form energy bonds with others, connections that transcend physical form. These bonds can be with one or many, and they're fluid, ever-changing. There's no jealousy. No fear of losing someone. Because we're always connected, even when we're apart." I tried to wrap my mind around the idea, but it was difficult. Everything about human relationships was built on the concept of separation of two people choosing each other above all others. What Yelena described sounded freer, but also alien. "Do you think that kind of bond could work here?" I asked, suddenly unsure of what I was even asking. Lena looked at me, her eyes soft and thoughtful. "I don't know, but I want to try." As time passed, our bond grew deeper, more complex. We navigated the strange space between human and alien with a kind of cautious grace, learning from each other, making mistakes, and finding new ways to communicate when words fell short. But even as we built our own world together, the outside world was beginning to take notice. Yelena's presence, as careful as she was to blend in, wasn't entirely invisible. There were moments, small, almost imperceptible instances where her true nature bled through. A brief flicker of light under her skin, a strange, unearthly glow in her eyes. People began to notice, and though most chalked it up to odd lighting or an overactive imagination, I could feel the tension building. One afternoon, as we walked through the city, a man passing by glanced at Yelena, his eyes narrowing as if he sensed something was off. He slowed his pace, turning to look back at her with suspicion. I squeezed her hand, whispering under my breath, "We need to be careful." She nodded, her face calm, but I could see the worry in her eyes. It was only a matter of time before someone figured out what she really was. And when they did, everything would change. The apartment was bathed in a soft, golden light from the lamps scattered around the room. Outside, the city buzzed with the sounds of life, but in here, it was quiet. Peaceful. Elena stood by the window, her fingers tracing the glass as she looked out into the night, her thoughts seemingly far away. We had spent the evening talking about everything and nothing about our worlds, about the people we were becoming together. There was an unspoken tension in the air, a kind of charged energy that neither of us had acknowledged yet, but it had been building for some time. As I sat on the couch, watching her, I felt a familiar pang in my chest. Yelena had come all the way to Earth for me, leaving behind a life I could barely comprehend. She had been so open to learning about our ways, about emotions, customs, and the complexities of human connection. But there was still so much about her that remained a mystery to me. She turned then, her luminous eyes catching mine. There was something different about her tonight, a quiet intensity in the way she looked at me. Slowly she walked over, her steps soft and deliberate. She sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her presence. "I've been thinking," she said softly, her voice like the hum of distant stars, "about something important." I shifted slightly, sensing the weight of her words. "What is it?" Lena hesitated for a moment, as if searching for the right way to say what was on her mind. Her gaze dropped to her hands, fingers still glowing faintly, as they rested in her lap. Then, she looked back at me, her expression both curious and vulnerable. "In your world," she began slowly, "humans connect. Physically. It's a part of your bonding, isn't it? A way to deepen your emotional ties." I nodded, suddenly feeling a lump form in my throat. I hadn't expected her to bring this up, but I could sense that she had been thinking about it for some time. "Yes," I said quietly. "It's one way. It's one way. It's how we express love and trust. It's more than just a physical act. It's about being close, about sharing something, intimate." Her eyes searched mine, as if weighing my words carefully. "In my world, we don't have physical reproduction in the way humans do. We don't connect through our bodies. But I want to understand it. I want to experience that part of your world with you." The room seemed to grow still, her words hanging between us like a fragile thread. I could see the sincerity in her expression, the genuine desire to understand something so foreign to her. It wasn't just about curiosity, it was about trust. She was willing to explore a human experience that she had never known, for the sake of our bond. I took a deep breath, feeling both humbled and nervous at the same time. Yelena, I began carefully, this is a big step. It's not something we have to rush. I don't want you to feel like you need to do this for me. Her hand found mine, her fingers warm and soft against my skin. I know, but I want to. I've learned so much about your world, about the way you experience emotions and connection. This is part of that, isn't it? Part of what makes you human. I couldn't argue with that. Physical intimacy was a huge part of how humans connected with one another, but it was also deeply personal, something that could strengthen a bond if done with care and respect. I met her gaze, my voice soft but steady. If you want to try, we can. But it's important that you understand it's not just about the act itself. It's about what it means. It's about sharing something vulnerable, something honest. And it's about making sure it's right for both of us. Lena's eyes softened, her expression tender. I trust you, she said simply. And I want to share that part of your world with you. I want to know what it feels like to connect in the way humans do. Her words sent a shiver through me, not just because of what she was asking, but because of the trust she was placing in me. This wasn't just about exploration, it was about the depth of our connection. The fact that she was willing to try something so foreign, something she didn't fully understand, spoke volumes about how much she cared. I took her hand in mine, squeezing it gently. We'll take it slow, I promised. And we'll make sure it's right for both of us. This isn't just about learning, it's about what we feel for each other. Lena nodded, her luminous eyes filled with both curiosity and something deeper, something that felt almost like love. She leaned closer, her touch light against my skin, and in that moment, I knew that whatever happened next, it would be the start of something new, something that would bring us closer in ways neither of us could fully predict. That night we didn't rush. We talked more, opening up about our fears, our hopes, and the challenges we knew we would face as two beings from entirely different worlds. There was no pressure, no expectation, just a shared understanding that whatever we chose to explore, it would be done with respect, care, and a willingness to learn from each other. In the end, what mattered most wasn't the act itself, but the trust we had built, the connection we had nurtured across the vastness of space. We were no longer just a human and an alien trying to bridge the gap between their worlds. We were something more, something profound. And as we lay together, the room bathed in the soft glow of her light, I realized that love, no matter the form it took, was the one thing that could truly transcend the boundaries of species, planets, and galaxies. The morning after that quiet, transformative night with Yelena felt different. It was as if the world had shifted on its axis, the air thick with the weight of what we had shared. I woke up with her beside me, her presence still carrying that quiet, otherworldly glow, and for a few moments, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. But reality has a way of catching up with you, especially when you're trying to bridge the impossible gap between two different species, two different worlds. I was making coffee, watching the sun filter in through the window, when Yelena appeared in the kitchen. She moved silently, her energy delicate but ever present. I could feel the tension in her as she approached, something heavy weighing on her shoulders. I turned toward her, a question on the tip of my tongue, but before I could say anything, she spoke. "We need to talk." The words sent a chill through me. I set the coffee cup down, the clatter of porcelain against the counter louder than it should have been in the quiet of the morning. I could see it in her eyes, the worry, the uncertainty. About what I asked, though I already had a sinking feeling I knew where this was going. Lena crossed the small kitchen, her movements graceful but tense, and sat at the table. Her fingers traced the grain of the wood absently, as if she was trying to gather her thoughts before speaking. "There are consequences to what we've done," she said quietly. "For me and for you." I frowned, pulling up a chair and sitting across from her. "What do you mean? Is something wrong?" Her eyes flickered, a soft glow of worry that dimmed for a moment. In my world, leaving is not something that happens lightly. It's more than just physical distance. When I left Kaloran, I severed a bond that's impossible to repair. I can never go back. I blinked, feeling the weight of her words settle over me like a heavy cloak. We had talked about this before, in abstract terms. I knew that leaving her world was significant, that it meant she was committing to a life on Earth with no way to return. But hearing it laid out so starkly now, after everything, made it feel real in a way I hadn't fully understood before. "You're sure? There's no way to reconnect with them?" Lena shook her head. "No, the bond we share is spiritual, mental, and physical. When I left, I broke that bond. In their eyes, I'm gone." I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine. Her fingers, though warmer now, still carried that faint pulse of light that reminded me she was not of this world. "You've given up so much," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "For me." Her eyes softened, and she squeezed my hand gently. "I don't regret it. But there's something else I need to tell you." I could feel the tension in her grip, the way her body stiffened slightly. Something darker lingered behind her words, and I braced myself. After I left, she continued, "There were repercussions. My people have realized I'm gone, and they're not happy about it." "What do you mean?" I asked, leaning forward, the knot in my stomach tightening. She took a deep breath, her expression becoming more guarded. "Ka-Laran is a peaceful world, but we have strict rules about interplanetary travel, especially when it comes to interacting with other species. When I left to come here, I did so without approval. It's seen as a violation of our code, a disruption of the balance. And now, they're coming after me." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I sat back, trying to process what she was saying. "They're coming here, to Earth?" She nodded. "Yes, I've been monitoring the energy fields. I can sense them. They're getting closer. They won't arrive right away, but they will come, and when they do, they'll try to bring me back. And if they find out about you..." I didn't need her to finish the sentence. The implications were clear. If her people discovered that she had formed a bond with a human, that she had crossed the vast divide between species to be with me, there would be consequences possibly for both of us. "What will they do?" I asked, my voice low. "If they find you?" Lena's expression darkened, her luminous eyes reflecting the gravity of the situation. "They'll try to take me back, forcefully if necessary. And if they find out that I've connected with you, they may see you as a threat. They don't understand human emotions the way I've come to. They might see our bond as something dangerous." The room felt colder, the once warm light of the morning now tinged with the chill of impending danger. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to make sense of it all. "So what do we do?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. "We can't just run, can we?" Lena stood up, pacing the small space with a grace that belied the anxiety radiating off her. "Running won't help. They'll find me no matter where we go. But I'm not going back. I've made my decision. I'm staying here. With you." I looked at her, my chest tight with a mix of fear and resolve. She had given up everything for me, her world, her people, the only life she had ever known. And now that decision was catching up with us in ways we couldn't have predicted. "We'll figure it out," I said, standing and crossing the room to her. I took her hand again, pulling her close. "We'll figure it out together." The days that followed were a strange mix of normalcy and tension. On the surface, life continued as it always had: work, errands, evenings spent together in quiet comfort. But beneath it all, there was an undercurrent of fear, a constant awareness that her people were drawing closer with each passing day. Lelena tried to stay calm, but I could see the strain it was putting on her. She had given up so much to be with me, and now it felt like the universe itself was conspiring to take it all away. One evening, as we sat on the couch, Lena spoke again, about the energy she could sense an approaching force, distant but unmistakable. "They're almost here," she said softly, her eyes focused on the window, as if she could feel them coming from the stars. "Maybe a few more days, maybe less." I didn't know what to say. The helplessness was suffocating, a weight pressing down on my chest. I had never imagined that being with Lena would lead to this, a confrontation with an alien civilization that I couldn't even begin to understand. But Yelena was calm, even as the threat loomed closer. "We have to be ready," she said quietly. "They won't understand why I left, or why I'm staying. But I won't let them take me." Her resolve was both comforting and terrifying. I didn't doubt her determination, but what could we do against beings who could traverse galaxies, who saw our bond as a threat to their very existence? As we sat there in the quiet of the night, the gravity of our situation settled in fully. We were no longer just two people navigating the complexities of an interspecies relationship. Now, we were on the verge of something far more dangerous, a clash of cultures, of worlds, that neither of us could avoid. The first sign of their arrival came sooner than expected. It was subtle, a faint distortion in the air, a hum of energy that seemed to ripple through the atmosphere. Yelena noticed it immediately, her body tensing as she stood by the window, her eyes wide with recognition. "They're here," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the quiet hum that now filled the room. I felt my stomach drop. There was no time to prepare, no time to think. Everything we had been dreading was happening right now, faster than either of us had anticipated. I moved to her side, my heart pounding in my chest. "What do we do?" Lena's eyes flickered with determination. "We stay together. No matter what happens, we stay together." Outside, the night was still and quiet, but there was a strange, electric quality to the air, as if the very fabric of reality was being stretched thin. I couldn't see them, but I knew they were close Yelena's people, come to take her back to a world I would never fully understand. I reached for her hand, my fingers curling around hers. "I'm not letting you go." She smiled at me, a sad but fierce expression that spoke of her own resolve. "And I'm not leaving." In that moment, we both knew what was at stake. Our bond, fragile and beautiful, was under threat, not just from the forces of her world, but from the weight of the universe itself. The hum grew louder, the air thick with anticipation. And then, the sky outside flickered with light, a brilliant flash of energy that signaled the arrival of something far beyond human comprehension. They had come. And now we would have to face them. Together. The sky above us seemed to pulse with an ethereal glow, a subtle but unmistakable presence that sent a shiver through my body. Yelena's hand in mine felt warm, steadying me, even as the energy in the air rippled like the calm before a storm. Outside the window, the streetlights flickered briefly, casting long shadows across the walls of our apartment. Something otherworldly, something powerful, had arrived. "They're close," Yelena whispered, her voice barely audible against the low hum that vibrated through the room. Her luminous eyes were fixed on the window, but I knew she wasn't really seeing the streets or the city beyond. She was sensing something far greater, a force from her world, a force I couldn't begin to comprehend. My heart pounded in my chest as I moved closer to her, squeezing her hand. "What happens now?" Yelena turned to me, her expression calm but determined. "They'll try to communicate first. My people don't resort to force unless they believe it's absolutely necessary, but we can't take any chances." The room was thick with tension, and I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on us. This was the climax of everything we had been building toward, the inevitable confrontation between two worlds, two different ways of life. And in the middle of it all, there was us. "I won't let them take you," I said, my voice trembling with conviction. "We'll figure this out." Yelena gave me a sad smile, one that spoke of her understanding of the gravity of the situation. "I won't go willingly, but they are powerful. We have to be smart." Before I could respond, the low hum that had been vibrating through the apartment intensified. The lights flickered once more, and then, without warning, the air in front of us shimmered, bending like heat waves off asphalt. A shape began to emerge, translucent at first, but becoming more solid with each passing second. I held my breath, my pulse quickening as the form took shape. 3 beings stood before us, their figures tall and elegant, their skin a faint shade of violet that seemed to glow softly in the dim light. They looked similar to Yelena, their features delicate but alien, their eyes large and reflective, holding the infinite depths of the universe within them. There was no malice in their appearance, but their presence carried a weight, a power that was impossible to ignore. For a moment, everything was still. The air between us hummed with unspoken energy, a quiet tension that stretched thin like the calm before a storm. I glanced at Yelena, whose face was unreadable, her eyes locked on the beings before us. One of them stepped forward, their movement graceful and fluid, as though they were gliding rather than walking. When they spoke, the words didn't come from their mouths but from somewhere deeper inside my mind, a voice that resonated with a strange, melodic frequency. "Elena of Kaloren, we have come for you." The voice was calm but firm, filled with an authority that left little room for doubt. I felt a cold sweat break out along my spine, and my grip on Yelena's hand tightened. She took a step forward, her expression resolute. I'm not going back. The being's eyes, two pools of light and shadow, narrowed slightly, and there was a pause, a shift in the energy around us. You have violated the order of our people. Your presence here disrupts the balance. Return with us, and you will be spared punishment. Resist, and we cannot guarantee your safety. Yelena's jaw tightened, and I could feel the tension radiating off her. She wasn't afraid, but she was prepared. This wasn't just a negotiation, it was an ultimatum. I've made my choice, she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. I'm staying here. I've found something on Earth that I can't give up. I watched as the beings shifted slightly, their luminous eyes flickering as they processed her words. The air seemed to thicken, and I could feel the pressure building, the tension between two worlds about to collide. I knew I had to say something. I couldn't just stand by and watch this happen. I stepped forward, my heart racing, my voice coming out louder than I expected. She's chosen to stay. You can't take her back against her will. The beings turned their gaze toward me, and for the first time I felt the full weight of their presence. It wasn't just their physical form, it was their energy, their connection to something far beyond what I could understand. Their eyes seemed to pierce through me, reading every thought, every fear. You are human, one of them said, their voice filling my mind with a strange echo. You do not understand the consequences of what you have done. Lena's bond with you threatens the equilibrium of our world. Her presence here is not compatible with your existence. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of their words pressing down on me, but I couldn't back down. Not now. I understand that she's given up everything for me, and I'm not letting her go. There was a long silence. The beings didn't move, but I could feel the energy in the room shifting, the hum of tension growing louder. Yelena stepped closer to me, her hand still in mine, her expression fierce and unwavering. I didn't come here lightly, she said, her voice filled with quiet strength. I know what I've given up, and I know what's at stake, but I also know that what I've found here is real. I won't go back to a life without it, without him. The beings seemed to process this, their faces impassive, their eyes glowing faintly. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the leader of the group spoke again, their voice softer this time, more contemplative. This bond you share. It defies the natural order of things. But there is something unusual about it. They turned their gaze toward Yelena, their eyes narrowing slightly. You have formed a connection with this human, one that we cannot easily sever. It is unprecedented. Yelena's hand squeezed mine, and I could feel the subtle tremor in her grip. She was ready to fight for us, for what we had, even against her own people. I felt a swell of emotion rise in my chest, love, fear, determination all mixed together in a whirlwind of intensity. The leader of the beings stepped closer, their figure towering but somehow gentle. We are not without compassion, they said, their voice low and resonant. If this is the path you choose, we will not force you to return. But know this, the life you build here will be one of exile. You will never be able to reconnect with Ka Loren. You will be an outcast, forever severed from the bonds that sustain our people. Lena's eyes shimmered with emotion, and for a moment, I thought I saw tears welling up, though they didn't fall. She had always known this would be the cost, had accepted it long before she even arrived on Earth, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that words alone couldn't convey. I understand, she said, her voice breaking slightly but filled with resolve. I've made my choice. The beings exchanged glances, their expressions inscrutable. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the leader gave a slow, deliberate nod. Very well. You are free to stay, but know that we cannot protect you from the consequences of this decision. You are on your own. With that, the air around us seemed to shift again, the energy in the room rippling like a wave. The beings began to dissolve, their forms flickering and fading until they were nothing more than a shimmering afterimage in the air. And then, they were gone. The silence that followed was deafening. The hum in the air had vanished, leaving only the sound of our breathing in the quiet of the apartment. I turned to Lena, her hands still tightly clasped in mine, her face a mixture of relief and sorrow. They're gone, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. You're free. She nodded, but I could see the weight of her choice in her eyes. Yes, she said softly, but I'm also alone now, truly alone. I pulled her into my arms, holding her tightly as the enormity of what had just happened sank in. Elena had given up everything for me, her world, her people, the very essence of what she had once been. And now we were on our own, facing a future that neither of us could fully predict. But as I held her, feeling the warmth of her body against mine, I knew one thing with absolute certainty: we would face it together. The days that followed were quiet, almost surreal. The tension that had hung over us like a storm cloud had finally lifted, but the reality of what we had chosen was only just beginning to settle in. Elena was free to stay on Earth, but the cost of that freedom was steep. She was cut off from her people, forever exiled from the world she had once called home. For me, the consequences were less tangible but no less real. We had made a choice that would define the rest of our lives, and while I didn't regret it, there was a part of me that couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead. We were charting a course through uncharted territory, and there were no maps to guide us. But in the quiet moments, when it was just the two of us, I found a kind of peace in our shared isolation. We had built something together, something that transcended the boundaries of species, of worlds. And though the future was uncertain, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it hand in hand. One evening, as we sat together on the balcony, watching the stars flicker faintly in the night sky, Elena turned to me, her expression soft but thoughtful. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, her voice carrying a hint of wonder, "about the future." I glanced at her, curious. "What about it?" She smiled, a small, almost shy smile. "We have a chance to build something new, something that no one else has ever done. We can create a life here, a life that's ours." I nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "I want that too," I said, taking her hand in mine. "I want to build a future with you." Elena leaned her head against my shoulder, her luminous eyes gazing up at the stars. "It won't be easy," she whispered, "but I believe in us." And as I looked out at the vast expanse of the universe, I realized that in all its infinite possibilities, what we had was the most extraordinary thing of all. We had defied the odds, bridged the gap between worlds, and chosen love in the face of impossible circumstances. And now, as we sat together, bathed in the soft glow of the starlight, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them with the strength of our bond. A bond that was as vast and boundless as the universe itself.